Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. A very exciting time for us Michigan fans as it relates to the recruiting trail. Not only do we have a commitment to talk about from three-star wide receiver Jaylen Pile in the 2026 class, but I'm sure many Michigan fans who are checking out a recruiting update on Thursday afternoon in the middle of the 2024 season, I'm sure you guys have seen some of the buzz that's coming out from this Michigan program as it relates to the recruiting trail, most notably around five-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola. And now all of a sudden, five-star quarterback, number one player in the country, Bryce Underwood. I also want to open up that discussion as well. Now, before we get into it, and as always, to the Michigan fans, I can't thank you guys enough. Many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan, so I love talking about this program, but I also really like talking about the recruiting trail. The amount of support y'all continue to show means the absolute world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about as it relates to Michigan on the recruiting trail over the next couple of weeks, or at least I hope that we have a lot to talk about. Without further ado, let's get into Jaylen Pile first. And I think what's intriguing about Jaylen Pile is you go and look at the sophomore film, you go and look at the height and weight, you go and look at the track times and say nothing really jumps out of the page, right? The film is solid. I think it's clear he's not a five-star prospect from the film. 6'1", 180, 11.9 in the 100-meter dash. That's nothing that is really jumping out at the paper. Now, I think what intrigues me about Jaylen Pile, one, I like to see Michigan going back to the state of Texas. Obviously, grabbed Andrew Marsh in the 2025 class. More importantly, this kid's offer list is very, very impressive. I mean, Texas, Oklahoma, a plethora of other schools down from the Southeast Conference. This kid seems to be more valued than a lot of the recruiting services kind of have him listed as. And I think when you start taking a look at why that might be, you look at why Michigan might have taken this commitment so early. It's kind of a projection. Hey, we think this kid's going to be a lot more coveted over the next 12 months. Let's lock him into this Michigan class in 2026 right now. And I think on the other hand, it's maybe the college programs who have massive scouting departments have seen this kid work out at camps and playing football games, say, hey, we like this kid a lot. And it seems like the consensus from the scouting departments from a lot of Power Four programs like this kid a lot more than what the recruiting services you kind of rank them. And so I think from a pure perspective of, hey, maybe kind of a diamond in the rough kind of get, you might have that with Jaylen Pile. So I think, and at the end of the day, for Michigan fans, like we've talked about this a lot, the more talent, the better in the wide receiver room. I've been pretty vocal that I don't think the wide receiver room is nearly good enough for Michigan. That's got to get fixed on the recruiting trail. And we've been hard on Ron Bellamy in terms of getting that talent in and developing that talent. It's nice to see him getting it going and bringing in some wide receivers to start the 2026 class. Now, I think what a lot of us want to talk about, including myself, is what might be going on in the 2025 class. Let's start with five-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola. This was one that the Michigan fans who've been rocking with the boys going back to the summer months know I'm not a recruiting insider. I've kind of continued to be optimistic about this one because you look at Andrew Babalo and say, all right, a raw offensive tackle with elite physical traits, a kid that values academics and what it looks like off the football field. This seemed like Michigan was written all over this recruitment. And you've seen he was very, very coveted cat. Oklahoma's after him, Auburn's after him, everybody in the country's after him. And it kind of came down to Auburn as a dark horse. Oklahoma was going after him. And it really seemed like it was between Michigan and Stanford. And I just looked at it and said the development of offensive line, what they can offer off the football field, it just seemed like this kid, Michigan had a really good shot at him. And I think another kind of interesting connection was Sharon Moore's obviously has a lot of experience from the state of Kansas. That's where Andrew Babalo is from. It seems like this recruitment's going in the right direction, and we might even be breaking down a commitment sometime soon for a five-star offensive tackle, Andrew Babalo. And this one, again, I think it makes so much sense. Like you talk about just raw potential. I'm not sure if there's an offensive tackle in the class that has a higher upside than Andrew Babalola. Now, is he the best player right now as a senior in high school? No, probably not. Although I've seen a little bit of the senior film, and there's a lot to like about Andrew Babalola in his game. This is a former basketball player that's an elite athlete with a ton of length that carries 280 exceptionally well. this kid has the potential to be a first round caliber dude for Michigan. I don't know if it's going to be year one, but you talk about year two, year three, I think you're looking at some serious high upside at that offensive tackle spot. And I think for Michigan fans, this one makes a lot of sense. And it's something that we all know Michigan wants to build this program, this roster through the trenches. Andrew Babalo would be a massive commitment. Obviously, the highest commitment Michigan would have in the 2025 class, but that might not be for long. Five-star quarterback, number one player in the country, Bryce Underwood. Look, I don't have a ton of information on how this recruitment is going, but we've seen the buzz. We've seen some of the stuff on the message boards. We've seen some of the stuff from the beat writers who might be a little bit more connected to this situation. Yeah, it sounds like there's some serious legs to Bryce Underwood in Michigan. And obviously, we all know this name, number one player in the state of Michigan. This was Michigan's top target in 2025. And I think where Michigan was in terms of trying to grab Bryce Underwood, it was hard with how the Michigan offense has looked. You look at Bryce Underwood, and I'll just kind of say this, and many of y'all know who listen to me. I don't normally say this type of thing, but I'm going to say it for Bryce Underwood. This is kind of a program changer. Yeah, at least in my opinion. You land Bryce Underwood one. I think he's an immediate starter in 2020 in the 2025 season. But I think more importantly, this is one of those commitments that kind of sends a ripple effect. And we kind of talk about Michigan and their struggles to recruit not only the quarterback position, but some of the pass catchers and the offensive skill. This is one of those guys that I think changes that. And you land Bryce Underwood, and all of a sudden these wide receivers are looking at Michigan and saying, yeah, this is an offense that, has some serious juice. We all know Bryce Underwood's a phenomenal football player, but kind of similar to when J.J. McCarthy committed to Michigan, and we started to see some of that talent look at it and say, hey, Michigan might be a spot where I want to go play with J.J. McCarthy. I think you get a very similar vibe from Bryce Underwood, and I think even more importantly, he almost forces Michigan to really open up this offense. And we've been kind of banging the table on this for years, but when you have Bryce Underwood, you want to go let him be a hero. You want to go let him take the reins of this offense. I think if Bryce Underwood commits to Michigan, like you're seeing a massive fundamental change in kind of the perception of Michigan on the offensive side of the football. But I think from a coaching staff perspective, I think the Michigan program will have to change how their offense works, because when you have a kid as talented as Bryce Underwood, who's one of the more talented quarterbacks that I've seen come out of the high school ranks in quite a long time, you can't let him have the training wheels on him. You got to let him go rip it around. And so I think not only do you see a little bit more talent come to Michigan if Bryce Underwood comes, I think more importantly, this Michigan offense, I think fundamentally changes. Now, there's not a ton for me to update everybody on in terms of this recruitment. I think it sounds like Michigan certainly has a real chance at flipping Bryce Underwood, having him play his football at home in Ann Arbor. That's extremely exciting. I mean, you take a look at the reception of Michigan, obviously a frustrating season in 2024, but if you can land the commitment of five-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola, the number one player in the country in Bryce Underwood, the future for Michigan, man, I think would be so bright. And again, I don't normally say program changers for a lot of these kids on the high school trail. I think sometimes it gets a little overblown. I don't think it'd be overblown for Bryce Underwood. Really exciting storyline to monitor and the ripple effect that we might see. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.